Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootleggers, yourselves, desolate, search, peasants, vassals, minions. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome, and I want to talk about Iraq. And it appears that all the indicators seem to be lining up to show that U.S. ground troops will be in Iraq proper. Right now, we have somewhat around 800 U.S. troops in Erbil in Kurdistan, which of course technically is part of Iraq. But now we're seeing lots of discussions of a lot more U.S. troops going to Iraq, ground troops. And the latest one is a story that came out in Reuters. And supposedly the governor, Sunni governor of Anbar province, confirms a deal for U.S. presence, quote, very soon, unquote. In the interview with Reuters, confirms meetings with U.S. diplomats and senior military officials, securing a promise not only of airstrikes, but a military presence on the ground. The governor of Anbar was quoted as saying, quote, no date was decided, but it will be very soon, and there will be a presence for the Americans in the western area, unquote. And let's remember, this is an area, Anbar province, that was a hotbed for resistance till the Sunnis were won over, essentially by a system of bribery. And they have since been, of course, persecuted and marginalized by the government in Baghdad. And then, of course, now we have Fallujah and Ramadi and most of the Anbar province under the control of ISIS, or the Islamic State, since all the way back in January. And so anyway, the governor went on to say, quote, I held several meetings with the American embassy and the U.S. commander, and very soon there will be a joint coordination center in operations in Anbar. They gave a promise, unquote. Of course, there's no confirmation of this from American sources yet, although we do have an announcement earlier today or yesterday where U.S. officials say they are considering sending more troops to Iraq. What a strange coincidence. The article says that the U.S. is saying fewer than 300, but let's remember that before, when the United States sent more troops to Iraq, it started out as 150, then it became 200, then it became 300, then it became 500. Now we have 800 in Erbil. And these 300 are supposedly headed to Baghdad. And we've heard these kind of numbers thrown around before, like I say, but they're headed to Baghdad. And the U.S. officials said that, quote, extra security around Baghdad, unquote, would be provided. So that also gives an indication that U.S. combat troops will be on the ground in Iraq, because it says extra security around Baghdad. They're not talking about advisors, not talking about trainers, they're not talking about private contractors. So supposedly there's 100 U.S. troops in Baghdad now, so that would bring it up to a force of 400, with 800 in Erbil, and that's roughly 1,400 U.S. troops. And then another article appeared that seems to indicate that the U.S. is looking for more private contractors for Iraq, and they're offering 12 to 36 month contracts. And I haven't found a whole lot of more details on that, and it could amount to nothing, but it is rather interesting that the U.S. is looking for more private contractors, and certainly ones with previous experience for Iraq, for a long period of time. So it does look like the United States is planning for a longer engagement there for possibly the next several years. And then look at the last 2 weeks. We're now up to 85 airstrikes supplied by the United States. So I can safely say that the United States is back in a war with Iraq. And unlike the previous video I did, where they were only working to defend the Kurds, now they are going to expand these operations apparently to include western Iraq and the Anbar province. We're talking about ground troops. We're talking about ground troops used for extra security around Baghdad, and the airstrikes go up. And this shouldn't be surprising in some ways. First of all, we have the predictable Iraqi Baghdad outcry. How come you can help the Kurds, but you won't help the Iraqi government more? So they have to rectify that. Then they've also found that because the very effective propaganda campaign about saving refugees and humanitarian relief and then protecting U.S. personnel in Kurdistan, this was used to reintroduce the United States back into Iraq. And apparently it's working because the American public seems to be in favor of these airstrikes. And as usual, they will just massage the public and continue these propaganda events like the refugees and now the Foley execution. All of these things go to pile up, and you will notice a dramatic increase in the rhetoric and the intensity of the rhetoric and the intentions of the U.S. And we're seeing that already with Obama announcing that we will be relentless against ISIS. So all of a sudden, it has become a big deal, and this will continue to escalate and amp up until we see a lot larger U.S. presence. And in fact, this seems to be part of the plan to have this ISIS event unfold between Iraq and Syria, and then the United States foreign policy can kill two birds with one stone and get justification for a broader war, a broader effort against ISIS across that entire region. And that will help redraw the borders of the region, break up Israel's adversaries in the region, and redraw the map of the Middle East, as we've discussed many times before in other videos. And another part of this, talking about the United States looking for more private contractors in Iraq, is that in spite of previous controversy, Blackwater apparently still operating in Baghdad and Iraq. And not only that, there's an article from the Wall Street Journal from back in February 2014 that talks about there's 5,000 private contractors that were previously on the United States Defense Department payroll who are now on the payroll of the Iraqi government. And companies like Triple Canopy and DynCorp International, who we all know are international mercenary companies, still have multi-billion contracts in Iraq for years to come. So these companies are making a fortune in Iraq now that Iraq government has to pay them directly. So they're no longer on the United States payroll, and they feel free to offer their service to the Iraqi government, probably at an expanded rate, an inflated rate. As of January 2014, theoretically, there's 12,500 U.S. contractors in Iraq, and a lot of those definitely are civilian contractors working to support systems that the United States sends over to Iraq, but we really have no way of knowing, and it's hard to say if we have companies like Triple Canopy and Academy, formerly Blackwater, and DynCorp International working there. We have a lot of security and mercenary forces there, and we really have no way of knowing how many. But in some ways, certainly we can consider that a U.S. presence in Iraq as well. And then if anybody has any doubts about the reality of these private contractors, and they're supposedly banned from being mercenaries per se, and are not allowed to be civilians in combat, technically, it turns out that a document surfaced from one of these private contract groups, a PowerPoint presentation about private contractors in Afghanistan and the guidelines, and it was the topics were expeditionary warfare, irregular warfare, special operations, and stabilization and reconstruction operations. So it pretty much sounds like mercenaries to me, and the company even admitted that this was a authentic PowerPoint presentation. So these contractors are definitely mercenaries. So there we have a big picture. We have a number of things adding up now that the United States presence in Iraq will expand, and that they're already drawing up plans for the long haul. The propaganda war is in place and in full gear, and we apparently have some sort of promise of a U.S. military presence now in Anbar. And of course, the United States could be playing them. Certainly, a promise from the United States about some sort of military support in Anbar will have to be aired out soon to have any authenticity. But it seems to make sense to me, and therefore I'm reporting it as such. So, Back to the Future. United States ground troops inevitably heading to Iraq. I'm a useful idiot, don't you be one too.